Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And please excuse my squeaky little voice. I managed to catch a cold, but people aren't tuning in to listen to me. They're tuning in to listen to my guests anyway, so it doesn't matter. So please join me in welcoming Tracy Lamourie to our program today. Welcome, Tracy. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm very good. How are you? Thank you.
Well, aside from being a little squeaky, I'm doing just fine.
You sound good as long as you feel good, okay?
I do. I feel fabulous. Or as I like to tell people, hunky-dory. I feel hunky-dory. I tell people if I ever say I'm not hunky-dory, then we need to worry, right? So let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Tracy Lamourie is a high-profile, international, award-winning publicist. She is the founder and managing director of Lamourie Media Incorporated. A regular on red carpets, and this is funny since we're doing this the day after the Grammys is when we're recording this, a regular on red carpets and accredited by the iconic Cannes International Film Festival. Tracy is also a Universal Women's Network 2020 Woman of Inspiration winner for the Women in Media Award and the author of the upcoming book, Get Repped, Build Your Brand with Effective Public and Media Relations. Featured in Rolling Stone magazine, The Hollywood Times, NBC TV, and other major media, Tracy works across borders and across industries from major entertainment projects to small businesses. So again, Tracy, welcome.
Hi.
Well, I always like to start off by asking my guests how they got to where they are today. So tell us a little bit about that.
So that's an interesting story. I have an interesting trajectory that you won't hear from any other publicist. My husband, Dave Parkinson, and I were young activists. We were in our 20s. We've been married 28 years now. We've been married. We just had our anniversary. And way back in thank you. Way back in the mid 90s when we were at, year 3 or 4 or 5. So we were still kids. We were both in sales, in kind of mid-level sales and marketing, but just, entry level. And, but we were activists. We were young activists. And it was the early days of the interwebs, the internet, and we got on the internet and, we had a radio show a couple of years previously, just through college radio, campus radio, but it was heard across the city, across Toronto, as far as Buffalo and, so it was, real radio. And it was like we covered news and activism and just, community stuff. That show didn't exist anymore, but in the early days of the internet, we were like, I guess we still wanted to have a voice. We were thinking, maybe we'll make a little web page. And in those days, you could make like a Netscape Navigator page.
Right. I remember those.
Right. You didn't need, you didn't need to have any kind of
We're
HTML
aging
knowledge.
Ourselves here.
I was going to say, and later I'll talk about Alta Vista.
Oh, I know. And AOL, right? Yikes.
You remember? That was the era. So everybody was getting online and, so we were just wanting to make like literally a simple little page that was just going to link to other things. Here's this issue, here's that issue. And somehow we got in like the bowels of the internet and started reading about this man who was saying he was innocent on death row, which was nothing to do with anything that we'd ever dealt with or anything.
It just somehow piqued your interest.
It just, we were like, how innocent can this guy be?
Yeah, you're like, yeah, right. Wink, wink.
Let's see. And I guess, one a podcaster said to me, well, what made you guys actually get involved? And you know what? I was like, that's a good question, huh? And I think what made us actually reach out is because we had been recently on that radio show. And so we'd been used to information gathering, like journalists, and, so that was what it initially, so it was curiosity, but also a bit more like looking for the story. And then he wrote back 28 pages written on both
Oh,
sides
wow.
with all kinds of details,
Mhm,
and the 2 inches of the legal documents that
mhm,
were in all the time. And it was enough that it was really disturbing. So we were like,
mm,
okay, so what do we do now? Do we
mhm.
just say, oh, great, well, thanks for the read?
Yes. Mhm,
I was curious.
mhm,
Well, now we felt like we had to do
mhm.
something. So my husband learned to make a website. And I
Okay.
learned to write a press release.
Mhm.
And that was literally my first press release. And we ended up getting international attention over the
Okay.
years. We learned, you know, how to engage the media
Mhm,
and how to deal with media, how to even be in the hot seat and all
mhm,
that in front of media. And it wasn't until 10 years after that, like it wasn't, that
mhm,
was not a financial thing or looking to be a publicist or anything. That was
mhm.
just going, and end of that story is that he was released on evidence of factual innocence in 2017. That
Wow.
was 20 years after we got involved
Mhm,
and after we'd gotten lawyers involved. And this was
mhm,
a long story. And it was never meant to be, you know, there was not a profit
mhm.
thing. But it suddenly hit me a couple of years after that when I was 42. And I suddenly thought, wait a minute, I don't have to keep making these sales calls about stuff I don't care about. I
Right.
could utilize these skills
Mhm,
that I've used because it had got to the point where, you know, like if something happened, like someone, I remember one
mhm.
time someone's mother had an issue at the hospital and everyone's like, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I'll write the press release. And
Right.
everyone's like, you'll
Mhm,
write the what now? So I realized that people didn't know how to engage the media the way I
mhm,
was like, it was second nature to me.
mhm.
So it suddenly hit me at 42, a decade ago now, that, you know, hey, some of those skills that I developed
Mhm,
as a young activist and over that
mhm,
campaign, what we call a campaign now,
mhm.
I could actually sell and
Right.
use, which is small businesses
Mhm,
to authors to anybody who needed to get their
mhm,
word, their message, their
mhm,
reputation out there. Yeah, so that's what it suddenly hit me a decade ago. At first, I started working as a freelancer,
mhm.
and then about halfway in, we did a general partnership, my husband and myself, which is like a sole proprietorship of two
Okay.
of us.
Okay. Right. Because you're in
And then
Canada. Mhm,
from there, we incorporated in 2020 in
mhm.
the middle of COVID.
Of
And
course.
it's
Mhm,
been, you know, we were able to find an audience. We were able to find, um, you know, people who still needed things promoted. At first, COVID was a big hit, like it
mhm,
was for everybody. We were involved with a lot of events and entertainment projects, and those were just dead in the water.
mhm.
So we lost
Right.
about
Because all of
75%
a
of
sudden nobody could do anything, especially
nothing.
in
And we like,
Canada.
what? So like everybody else, we were just staring at the
Mhm,
screens going, lost about 75% of our business
mhm,
initially. But then once I stopped just staring at the screen and started thinking, okay, well, you know what? I should go and do whatever 25% of work I do have left,
mhm.
and started getting back into that groove, and then
Okay.
thinking about who still needs to be promoted, like
Mhm,
authors that were coming out and, you know, new endeavors that people were
mhm,
doing in spite of, you know, restrictions, and
mhm,
those needed to be promoted. So yeah, so COVID ended up being not too bad for us. And I, you know, started doing a lot of podcasts
mhm,
just because I thought if I can't travel, you know,
mhm,
my voice can travel. And
mhm,
on the other end of it, I'll have more speaking engagements.
mhm.
And that's what's come to pass. That was
Great.
kind of, you have to be strategic about stuff, you
Mhm,
know, and if you're limited and think, okay, how can I still use this situation?
mhm.
Right.
Right. I love that, and I started NPR before you did. I won't even say when it was. It was a long time. It was before the internet was invented. Let me put it that way.
Whole
Um,
different business then, right?
I
Yeah.
know, and it was so different because when I started in public relations, I started with the American Cancer Society in Colorado. And the nice thing was we had a great relationship with our local media. But the other thing was it was also very limited. We had um, two newspapers, four television stations, not counting NPR, and and quite a few radio stations because it was Denver, but it was pretty limited. But yeah, we had a great relationship with them. So when we had, say, an event or something like that, we could go to them and and get something that they would probably publish. Now, of course, holy schmoly, everybody is a producer. I'm a producer, right? You're a producer. We all have our own content and things that we're getting out there. So do you find that it's easier or harder to get the media, and I'm going to put media in my little air quotes because it is still our traditional media, as well as our podcasters, our
Mhm.
influencers, TikTok, I mean, all of those things, because they're getting the word out there to people who wouldn't normally have seen it.
Mhm.
Do you think it's easier now that there's so much more, or harder because there's so much more?
A little of both. So you really have to be strategic because,
Okay.
it's easier in the sense that, if you don't get on those big four or the
Mhm.
big five,
Mhm.
immediately
Right.
there's other ways to get your message out there. There's
Mhm.
a myriad of high profile, like
Mhm.
something like Huffington Post, for
Mhm.
example, which I don't know what their numbers are, but millions of
Pretty
people
good.
read it a day,
Mhm.
more than the average newspaper.
Mhm.
Right. So while we think, or even like it's been told to me, remember Rolling Stone said to me, we were like, oh, well, the article about it'd be in the news in the Rolling Stone. And since then, it's actually come out in a special edition, a print
Oh,
issue of Rolling Stone.
wow.
But initially,
Mhm.
so they reprinted it because it
Mhm.
was such a good article. But
Mhm.
in the initial thing, they were like, no, it's only going to be in the online edition. And we're
Mhm.
like, oh, and they're like, yeah, everybody always says that. But they said if you're in the magazine, you get maybe 700,000. Don't quote me
Right,
exactly.
because there's only so many that are printed.
700,000 or so viewers, but
Mhm.
when you online, you get like
Mhm.
literally like 2 million
Right.
eyes
Mhm.
on it or something.
Mhm.
So it's massively, or even things like, people are like, oh, I want to be on TV. And of
Mhm.
course, like we utilize TV, we utilize radio, we
Mhm.
utilize
Mhm.
all of them, right? But the perception, people that grew up with TV like me, oh, that's awesome, I was on TV. Whereas in reality, sometimes that television appearance on a business level
Right.
can have very little
Mhm.
effect on your actual business other
Right.
than your friends saying, oh cool, I saw you on TV,
Yeah.
but you don't
And you
necessarily
put a
get
clip on your
calls.
website and then it's crickets.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily get calls from it.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily, sometimes you might, but not necessarily.
Mhm.
But a podcast that I've noticed, because I do them myself, right?
Mhm.
And at first I was just, like I said, during COVID thinking, oh well, I'll do some.
Mhm.
And I think I respect them like a media. To me, like you said,
Mhm.
television, there's television,
Mhm.
radio, newspapers, and now there's
Mhm.
podcasts and there's blogs, and they're all different kinds of media.
Mhm.
But at first I was only thinking of them as a
Mhm.
kind of a media.
Right.
But in addition to that, they're incredibly strong
Mhm.
for networking, for generation of
Mhm.
leads,
Mhm.
which I wasn't even looking for, and I'm not actively looking for. But I
Mhm.
love when people contact me and say, "Hey, I heard you on a podcast. I love what you have to say.
Mhm.
I'd love to work with you. I
Right.
want to hire you." And that has happened so many times to me from
Mhm.
a podcast. I can't, and I've been on television, I've been in the newspaper, I've been on
Mhm.
a million things, and I can't remember times when someone said, "I saw you on TV. I want to hire you," or "I read about you
Mm.
in the paper and I want to hire you."
Mhm.
But it has happened to me at least 10 times where
Wow.
someone has called me and
Mhm.
said, it could be podcasts I forgot about from 2 years ago.
Mhm.
They're evergreen. They keep on
Right.
going,
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Mhm.
So that's the thing. They keep going. They
Mhm.
have a dedicated audience of people
Mhm.
who are actually care about what you have
Mhm.
to say, as opposed to television or radio. How many people out of that million
Mhm.
are actually we're looking for that
Right.
message?
Right.
Right. So you might or might
Mhm.
not get it's still good. Don't get me wrong. It's good for
Mhm.
all kinds of
Oh
for
yeah, it's
thought
really nice
leadership.
to say I was on CBS Sunday Morning.
Yeah,
You
and it
know?
is true. I mean, I use it all the time, right? We use it,
Mhm.
I'm not denigrating it, I'm saying for sure.
Mhm.
But people sometimes think, oh, I want to be on TV, but I don't want to bother with
Mhm.
podcasts. That's a huge mistake.
Right.
You want to do all of it, whether from
Mhm.
small to large, as long as it's well done, well
Mhm.
produced, and on brand.
Mhm.
It's really, it's to your benefit to take advantage of other people's audiences, as we say, OPA, right?
Right. Mhm.
Other people's audiences.
Mhm. Right. And of course the cool thing about now we have so many choices is we can hit the right niche. And I mean, like I was interviewing, or I have a friend who writes for a podcast and a blog, and it's on pickup trucks. Now that is a pretty small little niche, but he's got a pretty avid following. And the really funny thing was that, and I don't know, it was, I think it was CBS Sunday Morning. It's the only news program I watch because it's not all icky. It's a much more inspirational type of things. They interviewed him because there was a brand new pickup line that was coming out. There were probably EVs. So, that was something but they had caught his blog posts and all of those other things. So it was great. Now, I'm sure far more people still see the blog post and things like that, but
No, but
it
that's
did lead to
CBS
it.
builds that credibility now
Mhm.
too. He can
Right.
get on
Yeah.
any
Mhm.
stage, or
Mhm.
if he wants to be a speaker, if he wants to
Mhm.
whatever, being able to say that. That's that the third party, that validation,
Right.
the third party credibility, right?
Right.
So from a trusted source.
Right. And it's so fun to find those niches, because now there's, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many podcasts, because it's hard to even know, like there's obviously, how many are on, say, Spotify and iTunes and all those, but a lot of people just kind of broadcast out there, right? They do like Facebook Lives or whatever. And so, finding where you want to be is probably going to be one of the challenges. So you briefly mentioned that to do this, we have to be strategic. So when you're working with someone, what are the steps that you take them through?
So first of all, I want to know what their goals are. Well, the basic before even that is basics. They're going to send me all their links. They're going to send me all their socials.
You want to make sure that they're a good ongoing entity, all that good stuff first.
Yeah, and then I'm going to check out their bio, and I'm going to make a more compelling version of their bio that's going to speak to media, like talk about how they're a compelling speaker, because their bio doesn't necessarily. You can be all knowledgeable.
Right. Yeah, saying I invented the widget that, it's like,
right. You're not necessarily a good guest though. So I'll like spice it up to talk about how they're a compelling speaker and blah, blah, blah. And they can, do segments on this or that or whatever. But yeah, basically depending on their goals. For some people, for example, like their goals can be varied. Some people, I usually suggest everything. You should be doing speaking engagements where possible. You should be doing, media, TV, radio, newspapers, podcasts. You should be getting your name into any award, awards categories, whether it's within your industry or outside of your industry. Right. This is often a lot of things more general, whether it's geographically based or a disruptors awards or something like that. Women's in business or something that might be outside of your specific, because most people will know what awards are in their area, but they don't. Like I discovered last year when looking for clients, for example, L'Oreal, makeup brand, L'Oreal has an award. Any woman in business, any woman entrepreneur qualifies for it. They get, if you win, they get, right. See, they don't tell us. You have to know this. Yeah. That's my point. If you win, you get $20,000 and they ship you to Paris for a big event. And
oh my.
Huge. And you qualify.
Okay, Tracy, we're going to apply for that. You and I are going to apply for that, right?
Let's do it. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Because here's my point. We don't know about it. So we weren't in the running for it. The 20 people that know about it, they're in the running for it. They, apply, blah, somebody gets it. But all the awesome women that the ones you interview, me, we didn't know about that, so no one's coming and giving it to us. So we have to be aggressive about finding those things. It just takes Google. It just takes long hours of looking. It just takes, so that's one thing I suggest people get in the mix for awards. I suggest people go broad and do any interview that's, again, within their realm, within their, bailiwick, and it's well produced and, looks like you look at their site and you like what they're doing. They're not a couple kids in the basement yelling at each other or something. Do it, But yeah, in terms of, sometimes people think it's just in terms of strategy, they start small and go big. You don't necessarily. I go from it all the next day. One of the stories I love to tell is I have a client, 26 years old. She was a life coach, like a lot of people, with nothing to differentiate herself on paper. She was amazing if you knew her and talked to her, but nothing on paper to differentiate herself from anyone.
She was just kind of one of hundreds, thousands.
Right, on a page, like, same kind of language, same kind of whatever. But she had zero media, but she had a really good story where she wanted to share her personal backstory, which in her case was living successfully with bipolar. And she wanted to talk to media about that, and then people would know that she had, come through this, right, and had something to say. So, literally, she had zero media. She'd never done media. The day she hired me, and I gave her a good deal because she was, young, and I thought, oh, it's a good story. It won't be too much attention, right? So, literally the first day, no kidding, the day after she hired me, I found Good Housekeeping magazine was actively looking to speak to women between 28 or 25 and 40 who we'll talk about bipolar, something like that.
Wow.
And
So it was perfect. Uh-huh.
insane. And the deadline had passed. And usually when the deadline passed, you can't even reach the reporter
Mhm.
through these services. But I found the name of the reporter and researched her
Mhm.
and emailed her personally and said, oh,
Mhm.
I hope it's not you. It would only pass by a couple of hours.
Mm.
Anyway, so she interviewed my client,
Mhm.
loved her. And so Clifford's very first media out of
Mhm.
the gate was in the print issue of Good Housekeeping.
Oh my.
Literally every newsstand in the world.
Mhm.
Printed right out of the gate. And so
Mhm.
she hires me every month
Mhm.
because she's got more media and more
Mhm.
media and more media. And she does whatever. She gets speaking engagements,
Mhm.
she gets whatever, all on the basis of that. Now she's
Mhm.
called a mental health champion in other
Mhm.
articles. It all started because of that, because she can
Mhm.
say, as seen in Good Housekeeping
Right.
article about my mental illness.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
So
And you mentioned doing the research, and that is what is absolutely critical. And then, as you did, tailoring the pitch to fit that media. We get 5, 10. I mean, we've done well over 800 podcasts. And so we get pitched to a lot, 5 to 10 times a week at least. And we keep them all on a list. But I love the ones who've clearly researched us. So it's not
yeah,
just,
and they
hey,
know what the show is.
we're PR firm X, and here's our 5 clients for the week. Okay, I'll put them on the
It's so
list.
bad. I know. I don't know what people do sometimes. I swear.
Mhm.
They just throw things at, and they don't
Right.
like. I've heard horror stories from. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, I've
Oh,
heard horror
no, no.
stories from podcasters where they're like,
Mhm.
"We don't even have guests,"
Mhm.
and I'll have
I
someone
know. Yeah. Mhm.
saying, "Oh, I love your show. I
Mhm.
was listening to it, and
Mhm.
here's another great guest for you." We don't have guests, or
Right.
things that
Yeah.
are
Mhm.
obviously where they have it.
Mhm.
It's just like a generic pitch
Mhm.
that they send to
Right.
everybody.
Mhm. Right. And yeah, I mean, it's clear when they've done their research, and I'll be honest, it doesn't take too much for me to go, ooh, and so, like, if somebody says, hey, we listened to your interview with Tracy Lamourie and we absolutely loved what she said about X. So then it's like, okay, well, they at least caught 5 minutes of the interview. So then they get moved to the top of the queue. But it's so interesting when somebody has something different that piques my interest. Several years ago, I had a young woman send us a pitch, and she was promoting her book on how on that she wrote about her journey with in vitro fertilization. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So I contacted her back and I said, okay, but this is a business podcast. Tell me how this pertains. Now, this young woman, very sharp. Actually, we're friends. I'm going to be on her podcast in a couple of weeks. All these various things, but she told me, she said, aha, she said, I quit my job, and this is now my job to promote this book. And so then she went through those steps, and I went, that's the hook for why this is good for a business program. So then when she wrote, step 2, because the child was now going to kindergarten, if I remember right, we were able to say these were all of the things that she did from a professional standpoint, so that the topic of in vitro fertilization didn't really matter. It was how she had used that topic to promote herself, much like your young woman who had mental illness. I mean, it's how do you tie it in to fit what that podcast, what that media outlet is.
Yeah, that's a good story. And I can't remember the exact thing now, and I wish I could, but we had a story where I had pitched to Australian morning television, an American client, and it was actually a cannabis industry client, but it was, she wasn't from the cannabis industry per se, but it was they had organic rolling paper made out of roses, fruit or something like that. And it was in a legal state, obviously. And she had a really cool backstory, though. Like, she was like, in essence, she was like a young entrepreneur, young woman entrepreneur who she had her previous business was like eco something like water infiltration or whatever. And now anyway, I can't remember the exact deal, but I pitched her to this business platform in Australian television. They did a lot of my clients on business stories, and they had accepted, and they were going to interview her. And literally, like half an hour before the interview, one of the producers came in and said, "Oh, we can't do anything relating to cannabis. It's
Oh,
Australia,
no.
and they were really tight." And they're like, and
Ah.
I was like, "Oh man, you didn't know that, you didn't read that, you know." And then I
Mhm,
was like, I was about to say, "Okay, yeah, I get it."
mhm.
And I was like, "No, no, no, hold on.
Right.
Here's your angle,
Mhm,
and here's how you can do it."
mhm,
And I told the producer, and I can't remember exactly what was the
mhm.
thing. It was, I think it was something with the eco and more
Right.
highlighting her as a
Mhm,
young Caribbean
mhm.
woman and doing
Right.
business. And I just
Mhm,
made an angle, and he was like, "Huh, okay." And it
mhm.
was literally like, I was like, "Whoo,
Yeah,
saved it
yeah.
so."
Mhm,
Oh yeah, and here's the thing. At first he had said, "Oh, we could maybe change it by making it a story about like tobacco rolling papers." And I was like, "Oh no, 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 no.
no, that's
That's
not
not
what
gonna
this
work because
is.
these
Mhm,
people are like, number one, that's dishonest. And
right.
number two, it was like an eco brand, like it was
Mhm,
about health. It was not about tobacco, right? In her
mhm,
mind, cannabis was a different thing. Anyway,
mhm,
I was like, no, no, no. We're
mhm,
not going to do the interview then. And I was
mhm,
like, but wait, here's your angle.
mhm.
And I was really proud of that
Young
one because
entrepreneur. Yeah.
I was able to like switch
Mhm,
it from something that they were scared of because of
mhm.
whatever, and just reframe it for them. So they were
Right.
like, "Oh yeah."
Mhm,
And that's like what you're saying is what it's all
right.
about, is framing it for the right,
Mhm,
framing the story for the right
right. Yeah.
audience and finding
I
that
I had
audience.
is a very similar guest on, something like that where he manufactures the growing. It's not a greenhouse, but he grows his own. And he's in a state where it's legal and all of those things. And he has very severe migraines, but he
Hmm.
grows his own. And so we talked about the technology that he was using to do
Oh,
all
that's
this. And
interesting.
yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
and
Yeah.
so it really was. And it was the cool part about it was when you close they had grow lights in it. And so when you close the doors, it just looked like this nice, pretty wooden armoire. And
Yeah,
that was
I saw
part of the
something like
sales
that
pitch
once.
was,
Oh,
you can be
I
doing
saw
this in
something like
your
that
house and your
once.
neighbors won't know.
They have
Now,
this cute little, I just saw it in a magazine or
mhm,
something. They have this like, this will be like in a living room. It was like,
right.
it looked like a
Yeah.
plant, like a
Hmm.
clear, it was
Hmm.
really pretty,
Hmm.
like a little bit of furniture. And I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know how it worked
Well, and
inside,
and
but
he did
like,
point out you can grow other things in it. I mean, because it has grow lights and all of those things. He said this is just what
yeah,
I grow in it. But yeah, it was that knowing how to frame it so that it matched the story, because we went,
yeah.
okay. So he talked about the process of getting a patent. I mean, all sorts of things that were just very
What's another
interesting.
interesting thing that I remember that from way before, maybe this is the days when you
Hmm.
were a publicist, before I was ever a publicist,
Hmm.
but back in 1994, when
Hmm.
the internet was starting,
Hmm.
like I'm a person that reads every magazine and I read cover to cover.
Hmm.
And I used to have like 15 subscriptions,
Hmm.
just like everything from Time to,
Hmm.
to Cosmo to whatever. Back in 94, I did,
Hmm.
especially because we used to have the radio show.
Hmm.
And so I used to read everything looking for ideas
Hmm.
and stories and stuff. And I specifically remember when the internet, this is so weird, Deb, when the internet was introduced
Hmm.
to us. It was called the World Wide Web then.
Right.
I don't know if you
Yes. That's
remember.
where the
And all of a
WWW
sudden,
comes in for you youngsters.
right. And if you right,
Hmm.
and if you Google World Wide Web
Hmm.
and 1994 or something, whatever,
Hmm.
like if you Google to try to find those old articles,
Hmm.
you'll see that everybody obviously was talking about it. But
Right.
it's funny because I would get monthly magazine subscriptions on
Hmm.
a weekly basis. I was always reading the new magazines,
Hmm.
like consistently.
Hmm.
So I specifically noticed there was a period when I suddenly went, wait a minute, it's the first time I've ever seen, literally like this week, it was almost like this week. It's almost
Hmm.
like the press release went out to tell the public about it,
Hmm.
about the World Wide Web.
Hmm.
Because all of a sudden, over a period of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a
Hmm.
month, every single magazine about every topic
Hmm.
was talking about, when they hadn't talked about it before.
Right.
And the technology had
Hmm.
existed before,
Hmm.
right? It just wasn't in great use,
Hmm.
and it wasn't, but all of a sudden, somewhere around 93, is when I was right I was coming out with my husband,
Hmm.
like beginning of 94 into 93, whatever.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, everything from Cosmo
Hmm.
magazine had a big article, had their take on
Hmm.
it, the World Wide Web, about, how you can do dating on the World Wide Web. And then
Hmm.
Science Technology magazine, oh, the advances that we're making in, on the World Wide Web.
Hmm.
And then whatever. House and whatever magazine. Oh, did you know that on the World Wide Web you can see mock-ups up? So
Right, you
literally
can
all of a sudden,
download your plans, all of those various
like
things.
every single, it was the
Mhm.
biggest, the AOL, but yeah, all of a sudden, like there was literally a period of like a week to a month
Mhm.
where it's like, okay, tell people about the World Wide Web,
Mhm.
and like everything
Mhm.
had their angle on it,
Right.
but all of a sudden they were talking
Mhm.
about that, and it was like,
Right.
whoa.
Mhm.
And because like I said, because I was reading magazines
Mhm.
constantly at that time, and I
Mhm.
was always a month or two behind, so I'd
Mhm.
have a little stack of them. So all of
Mhm.
a sudden I ditched that one. I'm like, what the hell? Look at
Yeah,
these
what is
covers of
this?
every single
Mhm.
one of these, like,
Mhm.
and yeah. So anyway, that kind of thing is interesting
Mhm.
because they were all telling this, to
Right.
your original point, they were all telling the story in
Mhm.
different ways
Right.
for their audience.
Well, and that's where it's so good to, have a client that has something that they can talk about pertaining to that. And like, I tell people, some of the things, like there's, there's somebody, some business person, right? Some innovator, some entrepreneur who created the calendars for, this is, National Chocolate Cookie Day, or, all of those things. So if you're a baker and you tie into some of those are great hooks. There's
Exactly.
all sorts of things, excuse me, that you can be looking for where you can tie into it. Now, some are good, some are not so good. I mean, as we're recording this today, early this morning, there was a huge earthquake in Turkey. So, you don't want to exploit that, but maybe you can talk about a water purification system, things like that. And so there are a lot of ways where people can look at what's going on in the world and say,
Exactly.
hey, I can contribute to this.
Yeah, I often say that like a topical press release where I'll explain it to an entrepreneur by saying, when they're like, it's not that the best releases are not about, this business is doing X,
Right.
X, and
Yes. I came up with widget X.
yeah,
Who
because that's
cares? Sorry.
they'll be like, buy an ad, the best really, but that's what people are usually thinking, entrepreneur to be in the news, yet to do that. No, the best thing is to comment with your expertise. Like I always say, it doesn't matter what you do for a living, you have an expertise that most of us don't have.
Right.
Like if you're a lawn care expert, for example, or you're a bug removal guy, or whatever it is. Anytime, and I'll tell people, whenever you're watching the news and you see something that you turn around to your partner or your friend and say, oh, you know what I have to say about something that you know about based on your professional expertise, tell me, the publicist, about it, because that could be the basis of like you're saying, exactly right, the basis of a press release, where you could be saying, like, hey, have you noticed, like for the bug guy, have you noticed there's more, termites this year than usual? Well, that could right there. We wouldn't know that. If that's something that you've noticed in your work, make a topical release about that. Because that's a newsworthy story, that kind of stuff. Just a general professional knowledge that you have. And even things that, you think, oh, what wouldn't be, like marketing, for example. A client hired me, they just did marketing, and at first I'm thinking, okay, what kind of
So
media
how do you pitch that?
what kind of media will I be able to get him? Well, as soon as I started looking, and it turned out we got him more media that first 2 weeks than we had any other media for any other client. Because it turns out there's a ton of, as soon as you start looking, there's a bunch of media asking, and every kind of media, from mainstream media to,
what tips do you have? All of those various type of things.
And, the first one I remember, one was like some glossy magazine for dentists, like an industry magazine, but they wanted to do an article with tips for making a dentist
top
website.
10. We were talking about dentists before. So what are the top 10 tips for being a dentist, or for marketing your dentist practice?
There was other ones that had just like mainstream magazines. I wanted SEO tips, or I mean, it was insane. Literally, I was like, every single day there was a ton of opportunities for that. I was like, boy, gee, to be honest with you, I wasn't sure what kind of what we'd get for you, but wow. So it doesn't matter whether you, like I always say, whether you clean the toilets at the hotel, you're a publicist, or whatever. It doesn't matter. You have a professional expertise, and there's media either that you could introduce the story to, or there's media that's already looking for your expertise and asking questions.
Right.
things like help a reporter out or quoted or
right. Yeah, Haro is definitely a good option. So, if somebody tells you, but obviously you just answered the question that I was going to ask about, if people say, I have nothing, what if they say, but Tracy, I'm boring. I really have nothing, my spouse doesn't even care what I do. What do you tell those people?
People say that all the time. They're like, oh, I'm nervous. I don't know what. And I go, well, you know what? Just once you start seeing, and a good way to, one good way to break that with people is to introduce them to Haro, help report out, or the quote or whatever. I say, go and look at Haro for a few days and you will be amazed. You'll be, because all of a sudden, don't care who you are, you're going to be like, oh, that's one I could answer.
Right.
Oh, yeah, gee, there. You'll start to see. And just the fact that you see a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, you're a real estate agent, you're going to see 50 things, that you could answer. So, but the fact that you start seeing those give you ideas of what media you'd be looking for. It gives you the confidence that, your voice would be, is not only will be receptive, you will be receptive to it, but that they're actively looking for people with your knowledge, so, and people have different comfort levels. Like some people don't want to do TV, they don't want to do radio, they don't want to do podcasts, and that's fine. We leave, we say, okay, that's fine. We leave off TV, radio, and podcast for them. Lucky for you, there's a lot of media, 90% of them, they just want to send you the questions by email these days anyway. So you can just answer them that way. And then once you start getting that comfort level, because you're like, oh, I did good. I knew all the answers. I've heard people think it's going to be like, gotcha, like 60 minutes or something. And they're out there to, But then I realized, no, it's always going to be something you're familiar with, something that you know. And like I say to people too, take the same confidence that you take to even put your shingle out. The same confidence that you take to take people's money for what you do. You wouldn't be doing that if you weren't sure that you know what
if you didn't believe in what you were doing, hopefully.
Right. Take that same confidence and realize you can, you have some knowledge that the average person doesn't have as well. So there are always, opportunities to share your knowledge. For sure.
I love it. And through my years of doing this, and I'm sure you've had this happen too, the people who want to control it. And, and there's a variety of ways. I mean, like the one time I remember, we were doing, this was when I was with the Cancer Society, our story didn't run. It didn't run. And, and they came, the person in charge came stomping into my office. And I said, you do understand the Gulf War started, so we kind of got bummed, and I also always tell people, unless you are an incredibly high level person, you don't get, and you still don't get to control. If you want to control it, that's called an ad.
Exactly. I was just gonna say, same when they're like, "Oh, you know what? I just did this interview 2 days ago. How come it hasn't been published yet?" And I'm like, seriously. Or some people really don't understand the difference between average. That's when you want to write the tag copy and you want to tell
on Sunday, all of those things. Yeah, that's an ad.
You could do that. But no, you're providing an opinion, you're providing an expert thing, you're providing content. They are not under any obligation to run your content, and certainly not on your timeline. So that's just you just can't. Exactly. I try to, on the outset, really be clear about that. And I try to, and say like, which magazines can you get me into? Or, or you can tell, and it's almost like I almost go, I don't even want to bother with this person if I have to start and explain the kind of concept of PR from the very beginning. Sometimes, it's exhausting. But they'll be like, okay, so what's your price and which magazines can you get me into?
Right. What are you guaranteeing? So that's the key
on like these sites, we share them around sometimes, like I laugh on these, like Upwork or Fiverr or whatever these sites are. I guess it would be more like Upwork, but I've seen people like post jobs because we all share them and laugh, right? We're like, oh my God, they're like, literally my budget $150.
Mhm.
And then the ask is like, I've written an article. Don't worry, the article's already written. I wrote it about my
Uh-huh.
company. And I want someone who can guarantee to get it in Rolling Stone. No
Right.
lie.
And you're like, yeah, and
I'm
it's
like,
about
let me
industrial
get this
waste
straight.
or,
You're gonna pay a publicist $150
Mhm.
or anything,
Mhm.
or $1,000 or
Right.
$8,000.
Mhm.
But I mean, in general, this guy's literally $150.
Mhm.
And that means you're gonna write an article,
Mhm.
like, and they're gonna print it in Rolling Stone.
Mhm.
Number one, I don't even know where to start. An article
Right.
about what? Your company?
Mhm.
Number two, are you a journalist?
Uh-huh.
You know how many reporters would love to write in Rolling Stone?
Mhm.
It's not, you can't write an article in
Mhm.
Rolling Stone. I'm sorry, my friend, for
Right.
$150
Mhm.
because you pay a
Mhm.
it's great.
Right. Right.
Like,
Well,
is the lack of understanding there. I don't
yeah.
want to be mean,
Yeah.
but like,
Now, yeah, if you want something in Rolling Stone, if you really want it, then yeah, it is called an ad.
an ad is a lot
Yeah.
more than $150, and they'll
Yeah.
sign
Oh
you an
yeah.
ad.
Yeah, and even if you're just doing a little online that's going to appear only regionally, no, it's still 100 more than 150. But yeah,
Yeah.
to me, that's always been one of the challenges is managing expectations when I'm working with
Yeah,
clients.
for sure.
I've had clients who have said, "Get me on Oprah." I'm like, "And what have you done?" Well, nothing.
It's
Okay,
Ellen
Oprah's, yeah,
now. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Oprah's
It's
people
all
are going to
Ellen
want
or
to
Joe
know what
Rogan
you've
or
done. Yeah,
yeah.
and granted, there are times, as you mentioned, where every once in a while you get lucky because somebody needs what you need just right then. But most of the time, it is about paying your dues, starting small, but also building those relationships with those reporters, with those writers, things like that.
And building your reputation.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah, I literally had a client like recently, and it was out of nowhere. Like they just literally have a brand new project. They don't even
Mhm,
have a single article. We had just got their first
mhm,
article, right? Like we're just before it
mhm,
hasn't even launched. We're a week in, and he's like, "Well,
mhm.
how do we get on Good Morning America?" And I've got a client on Good Morning America
Mhm.
before, but like, oh, I'll just call them up and they'll throw you on. It doesn't work that
Right.
way.
Yeah. Even if they do take your call, they're going to go, who? Who are you pitching to us,
Yeah,
Tracy?
it's got to be more like,
Mhm,
I had a very good friend who was an anchor of one of the like major news in
mhm.
Canada, like an
Right.
anchor.
Mhm.
But still, I didn't pitch her every story
No,
because I
no.
knew she could only
Mhm.
have like I knew what her story could
Right.
be and what,
Mhm,
and that was it. It
mhm,
doesn't matter. It's not about, and that's why people ask the wrong questions sometimes.
mhm,
Oh, who do you know, or
mhm. Right.
what relationships do you have? Well,
Mhm,
I've got a lot of
mhm,
relationship with media, but I've
mhm,
also placed people in major media with an email where I had
mhm.
zero
Right.
relationship.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
not about that. It's about,
mhm.
I mean, yeah, okay, the PR company, but they don't have to know the PR company. Sometimes it's a
Right.
simple fact that it comes from a
Mhm,
PR company,
mhm,
is like a buffer, like for some
mhm.
media when they get like 10,000 emails a day and they
Right.
don't want to open up every
Mhm,
entrepreneur's email
mhm,
because 90% of them are advertorial instead
mhm,
of editorial. So
mhm,
PR company, they're going to more likely to be opening it, right?
mhm,
But it's not, even the ones that have dealt with me 20 times, like, I've
mhm,
had reporters that love me because I've given them stories
mhm.
that they were the first to break that
Right.
ended up being front page news
Mhm,
across the country,
mhm,
literally across the country.
mhm,
And then I message them the next time and I'm like, stars, remember me? Remember me?
mhm.
And they
Right.
ignore that next
Mhm,
three pictures
mhm,
because it's not.
mhm,
But then the fourth one, when it's something that
mhm,
they can use, they use it. So
mhm,
it's not a matter of who does Tracy, it's not, it doesn't
mhm.
work that way,
Right.
I mean, the benefit is, yeah, they will open my emails
Mhm,
faster. Maybe they'll be like, ooh,
mhm,
and if I've given them good stories
mhm,
before, like we have a relationship, like you
mhm,
said, and they're more likely to
mhm,
trust and to say, oh, open hers. She
mhm,
remember those 5 times when she had the
mhm,
good ones for us, you know,
mhm.
and then you do get the quid pro quo and eventually, but
Right.
at the end of the day, too, like I've had successful releases in Las Vegas where I had never had any media,
Mhm,
and I had a client going there, so I did a media release and got her
mhm,
on 2 morning shows and an
mhm.
evening to out news. Good story, good
Right.
client, but still,
Mhm.
it's
Right.
it's
And it's about knowing what they need.
yeah,
What are their deadlines? What are they, I remember one time I was working with a client and they decided they could take it in-house. They didn't need, okay, fine. That was fine. And then they contacted me, and it was, well, so and so says they know all these people, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. And well, what happened was it was the guy in sales who knew the media people that did sales.
Oh, the
and
ad
he's like,
people.
yeah. It's like, no, that's not. And of course they got nothing. And I just thought it was kind of funny. But because they did come back to me and I politely turned them down. But,
Yeah.
it is about knowing, okay, well, this reporter works a month out, or, they're the type of reporter that does this, or, they,
Or they'll
even,
love this story,
yeah,
who
yeah.
they, like you
Yeah,
said, your
there might be a
research,
personal reason
what
in
they've
there for
done
them.
and who they, what they
Right.
like.
Yeah, and I always reminded my clients too that the reporter wants a good story, because it's their job too. They don't want to be writing about widgets that nobody cares about, but if they're writing about the story about widgets that were developed by an autistic person who, that's the story, and things like that. And most of the reporters are not the gotchas, they're not here I'm
Exactly.
gonna, Geraldo Rivera, right? And so they want to do a good story, but so you have to give it to them in a good format, and to say, okay, here's the story, here's how it will appeal to your readers, listeners, viewers.
Exactly. Spoon feed. I always say spoon feed the media.
Yeah, because they're being pitched
Plain.
thousands of times a day.
Yeah, exactly. So don't just say don't just say, okay, Tracy is a publicist with all kinds of awards. So what? Great. You want a doggy biscuit, Tracy? You have to say like, Tracy makes for a compelling segment on how people can build their brand without advertising, or she can speak on blah blah blah, or tell people how to blah blah blah. So when I say to my client, think about, if you were up on a stage, what would you be speaking about? If you were writing, what would be some of the chapters in your book? Suggest some ideas about segments, and give them that, because they're not. Why is it up to them to figure out how they can utilize you in a segment, right? Give them those segment ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I had somebody one time want to be a guest on the podcast, and we always ask for topics that you want to discuss, because we don't, part of it, I mean, I don't want to discuss something you have no knowledge about. That's not going to be fun. And so we do that. And the PR person, now it was really funny because they had done a successful pitch. We had the gentleman scheduled, and what we do for our podcast, and you did this, is we have this form that goes back and says, okay, here's what are the topics you want to talk about? What's your bio? Blah, 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 blah. And the response we got from the PR person was, do the research yourself.
That
really went over
bad
real
PR.
well, right? And so it was like, oh my gosh. And and I thought, now this is weird, because they had done a good pitch. And so I went ahead and did the interview. I mean, it was, and so when we were done, I was talking to the gentleman, and I said, can I ask you something? And we were just chatting. I mean, this was off the record. We'd stopped recording. And I said, are you getting what you're expecting out of this firm you're working with? And he said, well, to be honest, no. And I said, I'm going to tell you why. And,
good for you.
And he was not a happy camper. I don't know what he was paying them.
That's incredible.
Well, and especially when, we make it easy. Give us 3 to 5 topics or speaking points, or whatever
Honestly,
it is that we say.
Do the research yourself. Are you kidding me?
And that was exactly what she said. Do the research yourself. And I'm like, but she's she's actually not the first person who's done that. I'm like, no, you came to us. We didn't come to you. And hello, we can go to somebody else. I mean, that's the other thing.
And I'm not paid. Yeah, you're not getting paid for, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That's some really bad PR.
Right. Well, and the important thing to remember is, like we said, they're doing their job. So what can you do to make it easier? Okay, you're going to respond on time. You're going to give them the information they need. Now, stuff, there's maybe several times a month where we have guests who don't respond sometimes. Well, there's these things called spam filters, and we know that not always does our information get through. So we're, and so typically what we'll do is we'll try it a different way, because maybe my producer's email isn't getting through, but my email will, and so some things like that. But yeah, it's, if you're going to be interviewed by someone follow their rules. If they're
Exactly.
saying, and because they have their ways that they're going to do it. And like I said, it's very easy for them to go on to the next person on their list.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I've had people argue with when an editor has sent their requirements and the person is like, well, no, whatever. Like I think, well, that's fine. Or
Right.
I can't remember what the exact thing was, but I remember just being like, well, no, because it's their magazine. They're the editor.
Right.
They're gonna set the rules.
It's their toy. And my favorites are the ones, let's see, I've had several that we're getting ready to start. And I'll say, because we do a little pre-chat before we start recording, like you and I did. And I'll say now that, it's 58 minutes, and they'll go, really? I thought it was just a 15-minute interview. And I'm like, it is called the Business Power
I was going to say
Hour.
it's called the Power Hour.
And there have been a couple times where like, oh my God, now they've booked that much time in their calendar. So because, we do all of this stuff. So clearly they just weren't paying attention. And, or they changed it. I mean, that can happen too. They just, went, well, I don't know why they have an hour. So, I'm going to, and I did have one person who said, I only do 30-minute interviews. Now I had gone after him and I thought, okay, and I wanted him on the program. It's a podcast. If I do a shorter version, it's not a big deal. But, and he was very apologetic. He just said,
I guess in that case, since you asked him, but most cases when they're coming to you, like,
it's like, no, I've got my process, and I will tell people, I do have my process. The people who say, well, we sent you a one sheet. Yeah, but I have this form that I like you to fill out because then I know I've got all the information and your picture and your bio and all of that stuff. And you can cut and paste. I mean, it really is. It's not that difficult. I want to make it as easy for them also, whether it's their first interview or, their 500th that month. I want to make it as easy as possible for them.
Yeah, it comes off a nicer interview and a nice, smooth, like you said, conversation.
Right.
It's always better.
Right. And another thing that I like to tell people, if they're going to be on some of these, and they've hired someone like you, they still should do a little of their own research. If they're going to be say you pitched somebody for the podcast.
Before they come on a show.
Yeah. Listen to at least 10 minutes of the program.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. 100%. And if it was me, and some people do give you a list of shows that they ideally would like would like to be on, and then I'll research beyond that and say, and what about this one and this one and this one and this one, and But yeah, I like it best when people are actually paying attention and are involved and they want to, then obviously it's something they're engaged with already, and they know what it's like, and then they have something to contribute to it. It's great. Right.
And as you mentioned, there's so many options out there. There's things that are industry specific. There are things that are topic specific. Many countries. I mean, we have, foreign guests every single month. And so it's actually, back to what we were saying at the very beginning. I think in many ways it's become a much bigger challenge because there are so many options.
That's the thing, is so much noise, even just when you think about in the old days, before our time, even, there were like our time, there was like 20
Right. We pitched to ABC, CBS, and NBC.
There was like 3 channels, right? And if you were on one of those channels, you were famous to everybody.
Yep.
Now there are so many different, there are people who are incredibly famous, who have millions of followers, who you and I will never hear of ever. Right. But doesn't mean they're not famous. They're famous, but the world is so segmented and there's so many different media, like you said, 9 million channels and 10 million options, and then the internet, and then the podcast. So there's so many, there's so much noise to be heard through. And that's why I think it's important to, like, what I do and what I recommend my clients do, unless they don't want to, is to do it wide, to also, I speak, like, again, if it's, high, low, big, little, if it's long as it's well done, if it's on brand, if it's something that you can be proud to be with, do it. Because then when people search your name, there's 500 things, 1,000 things. Right. You can't deny that you're an expert in whatever you're an expert in. Right. And
it is good practice.
It's good practice, and it's, honestly, you'll get business results.
Mhm,
You will attract clients, especially if you
mhm,
do the podcast. You will attract clients.
mhm,
And then television, radio, newspapers, again, it's
mhm,
all hugely important. I
right.
had literally one client tell me, "You've changed my business and my life after just
Mhm.
6 weeks of working together."
Wow.
And when I said, I hear a lot of accolades, but that's a big one.
Mhm, mhm.
Why? She said, because you've made investors take me more seriously.
Ah.
So think about it. I Google people before I even do business with them, let
Mhm,
alone if I was going to
mhm,
drop $1 million or 50
mhm,
million. We can all say nice things about ourselves in
mhm,
our bios, in our deck, on
mhm,
our socials.
mhm,
But then when someone goes to the Google or the Alta
mhm,
Vista and searches you, what do they find?
mhm,
So if they're going to give money to this company A or company
mhm,
B, and company A already has been called a
mhm.
disruptor, and there's 10 articles, and
Right.
they've won an award,
Mhm,
and like had happened to my client, and
mhm.
company B is nothing
Crickets.
there but their own nice
Mhm,
things. Who are you going to be more
mhm.
attracted to?
Right.
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 So
Mhm,
there's real power in
mhm.
PR for real.
Right. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Tracy, this hour has just flown by. This is so much
Right.
fun. I love talking about this because this is my background and it's so much fun. And I think one of the things that we if that is people can do this themselves, but I think we just probably scared some people off, right? So what they do need to do is hire someone, which that's you. So tell us a little bit about how they find you and what are the services you provide.
Yeah, and I do work right across industries and across
Mhm,
borders, anywhere in the English speaking world. So if locally, if you need to get your message out locally, on a
mhm.
city level, on a state level, on a
Okay.
country level, on a national, global level,
Mhm,
I'm your girl. Um, I just like honest people that are doing awesome things. So
mhm,
yeah, you can reach me at Lamourie Media. That's Lamourie media.com. You can book in a free consultation. You can find me on all the socials.
mhm,
I'm the only Tracy Lamourie out there. So you can find me on Instagram as Tracy Lamourie PR Media. On Facebook, it's just Tracy Lamourie. On LinkedIn, Tracy Lamourie. And I would, be more than happy to engage with anybody. And if anybody's listening to this and thinking, oh, but how could it help my business?
mhm,
What about me? I'm happy to do a 20-minute, 30-minute free consult where we'll actually talk about, your specific business and what PR can do for you and what we can do for you. And also I want to mention too, PR can be, off-putting in terms of pricing.
mhm,
A lot of times it can be like, 3,000 a month, 3 months minimum.
mhm,
But because I do so much speaking specifically to small businesses and
mhm,
solopreneurs and authors, it's really important to me that I don't get people all hyped up about it and excited about something that is really vital to their business,
mhm,
and then they can't afford to do it. So
mhm.
I have put a lot of work and a lot of time into making all these different packages. This is the part that's advertorial, not editorial.
Right,
But
right. I
honestly,
love this, but people need to know this because
I
they're
want
thinking,
people to
"Oh my
understand it
gosh,
because
I can't afford you." Mhm,
it can be really off-putting, but
mhm,
honestly, I want people to be able to afford this. I want the solopreneurs and the
mhm,
authors, and that's who I like working with. At the
mhm.
end of the day, it's more fun to be like, oh, we got you in this, we got you in that. So I have, definitely put together different packages at different levels.
Okay.
That there's something for everybody.
Mhm,
So if you're interested, don't let budget put you off. At least have the conversation.
mhm. Perfect. I love it. I love it. And again, it's lamouremedia.com, Lamourie
You got
media.com.
it.
Perfect. I love it. Well, Tracy, this has been so much fun. And like I said, it's just been a blast talking with you. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
I always love when I get the chance to end with something. I love this, and I think I just first saw it on a meme, but I'll refer back real quickly to Jimmy Dennis, the guy that was innocent on death row and was freed. And he always said, never give up, which is a very simple thing. But when someone like that who's been through that says it. And then, I saw in a meme one day, and this is what I said, even when he's feeling down, and we still talk all the time, my husband and I, whenever he's feeling down, then I'll be like, hey, we didn't get this far to only get this far. So I really love that. Whether you're like up here, whether you're doing well and traveling and going to the VIP parties and hitting all the goals, but you still want to hit more, that's great. But even more importantly, to the people who aren't there, who are feeling like it was hard to get up out of bed, or they don't feel like they've accomplished things they wanted to accomplish, or they listen to this maybe and about other people being successful and they just don't feel like they're there. well, you didn't get this far to only get this far. If you got this far, you're a winner because you made it this far. Like, think of all the people and all the struggles and all the challenges that you got through to be here today, right? So you didn't get this far to only get this far.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And what a great way to end the program. I'm Deb Creer. I've been having so much fun talking with Tracy Lamourie. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.